Hello, hello, lovely people. Hope you're all doing well. Another freaking Web Wednesday. Go. I unfortunately didn't get to like the end of my prep. Still need to figure out the timing on that because sometimes it works out and some doesn't. So, on over, shall we? Here we go. Hello, Snowbat. Good to see you. How you doing? 9 people today, so it's gonna be good. Yeah, I did find a lot of time to get like some references. It's good. It has already proven very helpful that you know the post that I did in our community where I was asking people to submit their screenshots for games. I'm already using them currently, which is actually a nice addition. I wasn't expecting them, but hey, I was like, why the hell not? Hello, Sheila. Hello, David. Hello, designer. Doing well. Hello, Connor. Wait, Connor, is this a moment where I shame you for not like publishing your publishing? Oh my God, I can't speak today. Is this the moment where I shame you for like not posting your Wednesday? Is this the time? Or are we talking next week? Let me know. You know. Still gathering riff? Okay, next week then. Okay, got it. Is your back good? Because it's my first time seeing you standing. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's good. I usually what I try to do is I try to stand up whenever I have a meeting or I do like a live stream or something like that. Because otherwise I'm just sitting the entire. I do have a good chair though. So that is, if I can give a recommendation, get a good chair. I got myself a Herman Miller. Because you are going to be spending a lot of time in that chair, so might as well take care of it. Take care of your back stuff. Yeah, good to see you, Zayat, and thank you for the concern. I appreciate it. Save that energy. I will. I'll keep like building it up, you know. Hey, Joe. Good to see you. Hello, Marcos. Good to see you too. Hope you're all doing well. How's everyone's week been? Let me know how your week has been. My week has been a little bit of chaos, you know. We'll start with the small stuff. We'll start with this. Another one bites the dust. I love these mouses, but the clicker just keeps freaking dying on me. So I have to buy like every 2 years. I have to buy like a new mouse. I think I just like click too much. And then I was trying to like get it apart, but they make it like pretty difficult to do. And then like the pads underneath it, like it wouldn't get back onto it. So that's been a minor inconvenience. Oh, the scroll is always broken. Oh, these mouses have like an amazing scroll. Like I don't think I can ever get like used to like any other scroll. Ugh. Yeah. Logitech Mixmaster 3S. So yeah, I've been using them since like the 2, I think, and it's been really, really good. Yeah, what I haven't complained about really is like I love them, but just like this is my 3rd one that I bought in like, I don't know, let's say 5 years or something like that. I have a mouse with optical switches because I got tired of the clicker breaking. Oh, I should look at it. Yeah, I was looking in that one too, like the G502, or at least something more in that range, because I used to, wasn't anymore, but I used to have like a big Logitech gaming mouse. That was like pretty good as well. But it was wired, at least the one that I have. They're gonna launch the 4th. Oh, I mean, Honestly, I don't want any like improvements on this. Like, I'm fine if they just never invented a new one. But yeah, the rest of the week, let's see. So, work has been pretty good. Um, I've also been shopping around a little bit for like the potential next job because we are on the contract. So yeah, I want to stay ahead of the curve a little bit. So I'm slowly but surely keep my eyes out for like the next thing out there, which has been pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, what else has been happening? Oh, we're doing a lot of cool stuff on the course. So we have one person who just finished low poly modeling. So they basically gave like a whole introduction how to like get into like low poly modeling and introduction to Blender and all that kind of stuff. So I'm currently porting that to the website, and then basically doing a whole bunch of setup for like lessons that are like getting more and more finalized. So that's been going really well. Um, Pretty confident that by the end of the year, like that is the current goal, is that by the end of the year we can put it online, have people on board into it, and then just keep it going as like a live thing, and then keep developing it. That would be the strategy. Yeah, more detail on that. And then yesterday we had our team meeting. So in the team meeting, we actually discussed on how to improve. I guess we called it like community engagement, but we are looking into ways to incentivize and also reward people for giving other people feedback or being active in the community. So we're doing a lot of research, we're looking at a lot of options what we can do. But it's what is highly likely is that it might end up being like more of a consistent system that is going to be shared between the roles that we have for the team challenges, right? So I know that we kind of like stumbled upon that as well, but what we want to do is we want to make like a unified system where people can get like, I don't know, achievements or earn like special roles and kind of show them off as well, like in or like helping other people out. So we're kind of just going through the rhythm and we're looking at what we can do to get that system on the floor, and then also see what we can potentially put in as like rewards, right? Because there's so much cool stuff that we can do. Maybe we can link it to like, hey, if you're like the I'm just spitballing here, right? So maybe we can kind of link it to if you are the person who gave the most feedback and you are not in yourself, maybe we can get into like a mentor that as a reward. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, that's something that we've been discussing. Um, yeah, that's about it for that little update. It's been good fun though. It's been good fun. We've also rearranged like how we do our team meetings as well. Where before we spend way too much time on just giving updates, where now we're more building towards the future. So we have a bunch of really cool stuff in the works now that I'm excited to see how that's gonna turn out. Joe is asking, how's Nacho? He's doing good. He's doing good. He was going ballistic today because we had a repairman come in and he doesn't like people in his territory. So he went absolutely ballistic for a bit. But I just locked him up in my room here, so he's fine. It's almost the same, to be fair. Talking about like the MX Master, right? Like the mouse. I would expect it to be because, I mean, it's a really well designed mouse. Like, I talk to so many people that say that it's like their go-to like productivity mouse. So I can see that they wouldn't really want to change too much about it. So I had to say, I finished my exams and I think it's time to focus more on my passion. Let's go. Go for the passion. Hello, Matteo. I saw you sitting in chat earlier today, I think, like in our community Discord. If I wasn't at work, I would have jumped in. Yeah, welcome to the community. Kill. Yeah, what else has been happening? Let me see. Usually this is my time where like people in the chat like update me to like all the latest news, right? Because Oh my god, I've been a little bit out of the loop, to be honest. Game dev news, right? Game dev news. I don't want anything else to be in game dev loop zone. Um, but yeah, if there are new people joining, I just want to give like a quick introduction. I'm Timothy. I'm a senior environmental artist myself. I worked. It's almost like 10 years that I've worked in the industry, and this is just like my weekly thing that I do, where I give people from the community feedback and also answer some questions that you might have as well when it comes to game development. So you have any question that you might have or anything that I can help with, feel free to drop it in the chat and we can kind of talk about it and kind of weave it into the structure of this chat. And then we'll jump into some more feedback and just because I think we got 9 people. This is a good amount. As in, I don't think we're going to be running over too much today. Oh no, Eden. Eden published her Whip Wednesday too late, so unfortunately, not gonna be able to today. Good though. But yeah, let's have a look. In that case, let's jump right in. Let me switch on over. Oh, let's get to some juicy stuff. Let me pick a random one. I don't think Liz is gonna be here. We got a couple of people in the chat. I saw a designer in here, so let's switch on over to host. Get some context as well from our Discord. Just there we go. So I was asking a question. So basically the main question from designer was, I feel like the scene is now chaotic and I'm looking for a way to fix that. And I had like a follow-up question for designer in that case, asking about what does he mean by that specifically? And then the reply to that was, I don't know if it's just me because I spend too much time on it, but it seems like everything is cluttered and there's a lot of distraction. Especially when there's other elements that will be added later onto the floor and the buildings itself. I feel like it will be a mess. Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about that. So, get my tool back. Hey, Toa, what are you currently playing? I barely play any games, honestly. I think the next couple of months, up until like the end of the year, I'm mostly going to be focusing on yeah, on the course primarily. Like we're building a course, so I'll probably be focusing a lot of my time there. And then what I do is I'll play like 20 to 30 minutes before bed. I'll either chill or I'm currently playing like a little bit of Factorio because it's just like nice brain relaxing kind of stuff. Yeah, but there's a lot of time that goes into the course and I'm trying to like really just get things done when it comes to it. It's gonna take a while though. Yeah, what is everyone else playing? I feel like it's a time where I hear a lot of people talking about like Expedition 33, but in the sense that a lot of people are done with it now and they're kind of just like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. They kind of feel lost. I kind of had that same thing with Cyberpunk, not gonna lie, where afterwards I was like, man, this was such a good game, and I feel like not a lot of other games are gonna get close, you know? It felt really like I played something that was so different and so well put together in terms of like story that it really just gripped me from beginning to end. Yeah, doesn't happen a lot. Let me jump into your question in a bit, Marcos. Let me get to some feedback first for designer. So we were talking about chaos, right? Because you mentioned that, oh, everything looks like it's going to be cluttered. There's a lot of distractions. And I think you're absolutely right. So What I have had like a couple of things here. So I have like a couple of notes. And the first thing that I said is like chaos to me in this image is it's really hard to know where to look, right? Because I did a little blur down here. So this is basically taking the image and then blurring it. It feels like the brightest point of your image is just like almost 50% of the image. So there's no real point for us to be, okay, that's what we're gonna focus on. Or that's like a thing that is kind of pulling me in and adds like visual interest, right? Because everything kind of has the same sort of importance to the scene. And especially because we also don't have like any atmospheric depth, which usually helps to mitigate that at least a little bit. So that's why I added this here. Like you can see that like the further we go along, the less those buildings become an issue. Right? Obviously you don't have a whole cityscape. You have like a well put together town, but it's not like we can. But that is something that we talked about last week as well, that I want to see more atmospheric depth, because that is going to help a lot when it comes to focusing you more on the foreground. Because now there's nothing. And it's just everything is the same importance to, which is not good. So that would be like the first thing to do. Get some atmospheric depth. Right? So the atmosphere. And then what we can do on top of that is kind of add like specific regions where we want a little bit less focus. And then we can add some fogs in between some of the buildings and start to like curate where we want people, right? Now we've been talking about the whole scene, right? So we talked about there's a lot of similar values, there's no real depth, but I think also the main issue is that there's no focus, as in like, okay, where should we be looking? And how is the scene and how is the lighting kind of helping me to look at that point, right? Because you could make an argument that this little building here, let's say this is where we want to look, right? So we decide that this is going to be our focus point. Currently, that doesn't happen because the only thing that's kind of working in its favor is we have a contrast going on between orange and blue, right? But the rest of it is way brighter in terms of values, right? And we can again see that here, right? You can see that this little section here is not as strong as like all of this stuff, right? So we're going to get distracted by the brightest values are seen. So we need to find a way to avoid that. We can definitely work with the lighting. We can make sure that it kind of focuses more on the foreground. We can potentially there's a ton of options, right? We can push it more to nighttime and then have like lanterns in front and maybe like a couple of like lanterns in the back, but they're like less intense than the ones in the foreground. Gives us more control. But I would definitely look at the lighting first, because that is the main decider of where we're going to be focusing, right? And that's again why I did something like this, because I want to show you that like this is number one, and then potentially this is number two if you wanted us to focus there. In terms of like the hierarchy, right? Where we're going to be looking. So yeah, I would definitely have a look at some more examples. I quickly added like two for the atmosphere and the fog, right? But I think it could be really helpful to pick examples of more focused areas, right? Or more focused things within games that can really help you refine where you want to be looking, right? Because you could be like, hey, I don't want you to be looking at this. I want you to be looking at this tower. That can also work, right? And then we can kind of shift the whole scene and make sense so that it's all supporting this tower being like, again, lit up in the night or something like that. Right? But yeah, it needs to be supported by both the assets that we have in the scene, and then also just the lighting is gonna massively contribute. And that's where I pointed out like the main question, like where do you want people to look, right? That is the main question. And as artists, we need to spend a lot of time to think about that, because that is what that is what we're entrusted to do, right? Like we curate where people are going to be looking. There's this is going to be a little bit spoiler territory, but there's some great examples here from the Callisto protocol. It is very obvious, right? And it's also a completely different environment. But you can see that by curating something very heavily, like we can direct where people are going to be looking. Let me see if I had another example. I find this example really good as well. Because you can see, and this is again from the Callisto protocol, right? Is that you can see that this area here is brighter than this area here. And that's done by design, right? Because we want you to look at point 1 first before you look at point 2. Right? And there's other things as well that help with that. Like there's a person, as humans, we're conditioned to look for other humans, right? It's like an instinct that we have. So that is also going to help. There's contrast with like the thingy on the wall as well. And it's just the overall scene is like very brightly lit around like this little area, right? And that causes us to be like, okay, cool. We're looking here first, and then I see my next objective here. Just to give that example. So that is something that you have to curate for this scene as well. And where and how you're going to do that, that is totally up to you. Usually a good way of actually starting to do this is by picking the spot that is most important for you storytelling wise. Like what is going to be the most visually interesting piece in the scene that tells a little bit of the story and keep people engaged while they're looking at it, right? And then we can kind of support that with lights and that kind of stuff. Yeah, hope that was helpful. Best of luck. And yeah, thank you for posting your work, designer. Keep up the good work. Because yeah, it's not an easy scene to balance, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, look at a ton of examples, see how other people do it. Maybe on that kind of trend, we can kind of jump over to David, because honestly, we're going to be talking about a lot of the same things today, at least between like a certain amount of people, where it's again, the main question here is, okay, where do we focus, right? And how do we focus on things? But before we do that, I do want to answer the question that was from Marcos. So Marcos has a question about art tests. Recently, I had a test where they gave me 10 hours to complete one full game ready model. It's for an art lead? It's for an art lead. Do you mean it's for an art lead position, or is the art lead going to use it? I think it's for the position, but that would. Okay, is that normal? You're doing it for like an art lead position. So, in general, for anything higher than senior, it gets kind of doubtful at like mid, in my personal opinion as well. Anything above mid, if they ask you for an artist, I would just not do it. Because like if you think about it, right? Like an art lead is a person who's going to be in charge most of the time of other people, or setting the benchmark for other people, or be heavily involved with like outsource and other things going on, right? That's why they have the title of lead, right? But hold on, Nacho's barking. Okay. So yeah, talking about the lead position, like if they ask you to do an artist for a lead position, that is just, I don't think it's normal. I don't think it should be that. Maybe for a smaller company, I don't know. I'm already skeptical about this. Um yeah. I think also like if you have that experience, right? If you have the experience of being in the industry for, let's say for a lead position, like I'm expecting at least like at minimum 6 years or something like that, right? At that point, if they still throw you like an artist, I think, in my opinion, again, it's kind of disrespectful to do that. Yeah, that's just my opinion. I think obviously we have to look at it from like a pragmatic perspective as well. Whereas like right now in the industry, there's so many people with the amount of open jobs that there are. So obviously companies can get away with more than what they normally would do, right? So I don't know. They're just trying, I guess. But doing like a 10-hour artist for one full game ready model is actually not too bad. I actually really like that type of artist, honestly. So in terms of like the artist itself, right? I think that's good that it is so short and that you just have to do like one game ready model. I think that's perfect. Because otherwise what's going to end up is that you're going to end up in a position like me where I had to do multiple artists for like my second position in the games industry. That took me like 1 to 2 weeks, right? And then you do them like back to back and oh my god, it just drains you. And also for what reason? Because usually you do an artist and then you go into the industry and they expect you to do like 10% of what the artist was about. So it makes no sense. Anyway, and what do you think about non-paid artists? I think they're shit, but if we look at the industry again, right? The reason why they can get away with it is because there's much more supply than there is demand, right? So I think there are some companies that are doing not like paid artists, which I think is good, and I think I would really I'm a really big advocate for it because it doesn't only help people that want to do the artist themselves, but I think it also helps the company focus because now, oh, they're spending money on candidates, right? So they're not just gonna send out like big, I don't know, shotgun type tests to like everyone that is potentially applying, right? Now because they need to invest money, they have like more on the line and they're gonna be thinking about it more. But yeah, there's always the wish versus the reality, right? And I think the reality currently is that there's a lot of power in the hands of the companies rather than the individual, which has always been the case, but I feel like especially now, it's definitely exacerbated. The crazy part is that for a mid-sized studio, what size are we talking about? It would be interesting to know. I mean, would be interesting to do with that information. Now that I think about it. For an art lead? No. I mean, it kind of depends on what they do, right? Hey, John. Morning, morning. With investors from Google and Epic Games. Google? Okay. Interesting. I don't know too much about that world, to be honest. But let's see. Let's jump back into some feedback. Next one up is David with a sci-fi corridor. So there's a couple of questions here, but we were kind of talking about it already, right? So the big question or like the big point that I wanted to drive home, transitioning to the previous one, was where do we focus, right? And I think that's going to be directly applicable here as well, because I kind of made a note that like even if you look at the black and white version, right? Like all the attention is going here because this area is so bright. I think it's actually too bright for what it needs to be. But also there's nothing really of interest happening here, right? We're looking at a large door, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be like superly overly lit to be that visible. That's why, again, I was trying to go for like a couple of examples here where you can get away with being more careful with where you put lights and be more deliberate, right? Like this is more than enough to highlight that there is a door there, right? Whereas like in your case, it is so overwhelmingly bright that you're gonna end up with clipping in the values as well. What that means is that you can't discern, like let's say you have like a highlight on like a white object. That means that you can't even recognize the highlight because the base of the material is already pure white, you know? So we can't even get like highlights on that surface. That is also why, by the way, we have like PBR safe values. So I know that I think the materials aren't final, right? But just this is going to be really good going forward that you validate the materials in terms of how far they are on the roughness or base color spectrum, because that's going to be really, really important. Then I added some other things is we talked about the intensity of the lights just now, right? But what I think is also important is the color of the light and what kind of effect that might have on our mood and our emotion, right? Because for example, if we see this orange light, and it is bright orange, it is really intense orange, very saturated, which is like a part of the problem too, right? So it is really saturated. Because even if, again, we look at this light, this is already like saturated as well, but it is not that much in your face and it still feels like it's an actual physical light, right? Where again, it is so bright that is causing a lot of clipping. And it's causing the values to be like unrecognizable in certain areas. But what I actually wanted to talk about was the emotional effect about it, right? Because orange, we assign that to danger, right? So if we look at the whole scene, there's something super dangerous happening over here, where currently that doesn't really feel like it's the case, right? Because it's just a mechanic like trying to do like mechanic type stuff. So this is a case where we need to then combine the mood that we want to bring to the table, right? So let's say we do want to indicate that there's maybe something happening there and it's dangerous. We need to swap out the asset that we use to be more in line with conveying that mood. So in this case, an obvious example could be fire, right? So we have fire, it's orange, it's bright, immediate signs of danger. That is something that we can then swap out, right? But this is where you need to decide, right? Like you need to decide like, okay, what do I want to do story-wise? And what are the best assets that I can use to support that story? Because if you're going to look at mechanical, if you're going to look at like lights that mechanics use in real life situations, none of them are going to be orange. Right? Because like we just don't really have a lot of like bright orange like kind of lights. It's not the best way to like illuminate an area necessarily, right? So usually that's why we see in mechanical situations, in clinical situations, we usually go for the colder spectrum rather than the warmer spectrum because that light is more effective at illuminating by illuminating like certain areas. Oh no, that's a good question. What do you mean by validate PBR materials? Like go to physically base and copy the values? No, in Substance Painter, there's literally a smart material that you can drag in and it will highlight areas that are outside of the range of PBR. So I don't know what the specifics are for that range, even though I wrote about it like a week ago, I think. So let's say you have like the entire spectrum, right? And this is like, it goes from like 0 to 255, right? Like on the RGB spectrum. What it does is, because at 0, we still wanna have the ability to add shadow into it. And at 255, or like the opposite way around. At 255, like we still want to be able to add light to our materials, right? Because we want to have highlights, and we also want to be able to add shadows to it. What we actually do is the actual range of our materials needs to be within this range. And it cannot be in this range. So I think it goes from like, I don't know, something from like, let's say 20 to 230. Anything outside of that is not going to be PBR correct. But like I said again, like there's a handy smart material in Substance Painter, and also in Substance Designer, there's a node that you can just plug in wherever you need to plug it in. Either it's a layer or in your node stack, and you can use that to validate whatever material that you're creating. That's a good question. Well, so here's the thing, Connor. It's not necessarily going to help you with getting the right value for a specific material, right? That's not what it does. It's just trying to give you like a limitation on like how far you can push things. The last thing that I wanted to say on your first topic here, David, is that, yeah, again, everything is kind of vying for your attention, right? And you kind of want to have a hierarchy, right? And I think you're doing like a pretty decent job for the most part, because I do like these smaller lights, for example. They're like really good, like tertiary lights, right? So this is like in the hierarchy of like how intense your lights are. You kind of want to have this still be like number 1, this be number 2, right? This area, and then have like all the other lights are gonna kind of be at the same intensity, but they're just gonna be at a low intensity because they just add like little spots of light. And that's where we get to something like this again, right? Where you can kind of see layer really quick. You can kind of see this is definitely number 1. So this is number 1, right? This is the brightest point. This is where we focus. It's contrasted by a human silhouette, right? Which again, it is immediately recognizable for us, right? So we're pulled to that direction. This is number 2. It's just like some additional context fires, which is good. And then you have like all the smaller stuff happening in the background, right? But it feels very readable. It has like a clear hierarchy of like where the lighting needs to go. So we look at 1, and then we can kind of wander to like 2 and 3. Like at that point, it doesn't really make too much. It doesn't matter too much, right? But we definitely go to 1. Yeah. I want to add contrast of detail throughout the scene using the door as a visual resting point, but I haven't designed the door yet. So if you want to have that as like a visual resting point, I think you need to have a couple more areas where you can potentially do that, rather than just having the door. Because I feel like it's again, going back to what I was saying before, right? You want to have a combination of the best type of asset that can then be supported by like whatever we want to support it. I know that was pretty vague. So with this context for the door, right? Because we are putting so much attention on the door, I would honestly make the door more detailed than the rest of the surrounding environment. I would flip it around. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling attention to a door that is then going to be like a visual resting point. Then people are going to be wondering like, why are you pointing me at this door? There's nothing to see here, right? So we want to combine like our lighting and like where we push people towards with something interesting to see, right? Obviously in gameplay examples, as you see in some of these examples here, like it's a little bit easier because there's gameplay there to support that as well, right? But as visual artists, I think we need to do that just be it with visuals. But even you can see here that like there's a lot of stuff going on this door in contrast to like the rest of the scene, right? Like this area over here feels less important than this, and that is purely because there's so much happening, right? Like all the detail is just like focused on this door. So I hope that was like sort of clear that we want to combine. If we are highlighting something with lights, then let's highlight something that is worth looking at rather than an area of rest. Because we want, I think your vision is good, right? Where we want to have the combination, but then do the area of rest in areas where we're not really going to be drawn to. For example, here, right? Like the floor. Nothing really to see. Cool. Same here. Yeah, be very specific with those things. You could do the same thing, right? Like you could have the floor be your area of rest where you just have like a grate on the side, a grate on the opposite side, and then some smaller detail like in the middle maybe, and then move all the cables out of the way so that you have like a big space, a big area of rest. And then just condense all your detail into like an area like this. It really helps me when it comes to creating environments that invite exploration. Thanks. No worries, David. Thank you so much for all the good work as well. Putting in a bunch of time. I can definitely see that. Yeah. And I do like, like some of these organic like things that you're creating. It looks sick. So yeah. Good stuff, David. Thank you for posting your work. Right. Was there anything that we can kind of relate to it? So I'm gonna jump to No Austin because I'm gonna keep this like pretty short. Because what I would say to No Austin in this case is honestly look at our previous examples of where David started, right? Because I feel like David has done such a good job of going from like something like that is really blocky and doesn't really invite like a ton of interest to something that is like really interesting to look at. So I know that I give like a lot of feedback, right, and I don't focus on the positives too much, but I really have to say, David, like you've done like a fantastic job transforming your environment from like, just like a sci-fi square tunnel to something that actually feels and looks interesting. So for more in-depth discussions on that, go look at like the previous Whip Wednesdays. Because that might be really helpful. That's also what I'm saying here. I think because the question was like, how do I make like a more interesting like wall texture? I think in this case, you can make a good wall texture and it can definitely help make the wall feel more interesting. But I would start with the actual geometry, make the geometry more interesting before you then add a wall texture on. Because right now, it kind of just looks like a box, right? And even if it's supposed to be like a large hanger floor, like we can still make those interesting as well. And we can still look at like the rules of design by like adding interesting little sections and yeah, make it more interesting that way. To add though, I gave you some examples here with like panel variation, right? So in here, this is a screenshot from like Prey. You can see that there is like lots of panel variation that could be like really helpful. This is also like an interesting little section that can be used from Star Citizen, from one of their designs. Really interesting little section, and it kind of highlights the next point that I want to bring up as like a little additional tip. You can do a lot with floor markings. You can do an absolute shit ton with floor marking. Um, if you strip out the floor markings and like all the decals on this, it would look pretty boring. But all these floor markings, they add context, they add believability, they add like a depth to the world that you would only have with doing those decals and floor markings. Yeah, that would be something to look. Just a couple of tips there. Cool. And then there was actually something interesting that I want to bring up um, for you, Noah and Austin, because you were talking about the story of your, where is it? And you said, like, I would love to have some critique on how to make the space more messy. The soldiers on the ship only come to get what they need, and if anything breaks, they don't fix it because it's very low on their list of priorities. You will not believe that one sentence, how much you can squeeze out of that. If you visualize that sentence, it would be really interesting. Because we have soldiers, right? So it's a military ship. That informs the design of the space, right? Because right now, because the space is so big and it's just like a bunch of like random stuff in there, it doesn't feel like a military ship. It feels like a transport ship, right? So think about that. Think about what the difference would be between a military ship and a like transport hauler or something like that, right? My recommendation there would be to look at Star Citizen because they do a good job of just like designing. They have specific designs for specific lines of ships, and they try to like really emphasize that. That could be like a good thing to look into. Because yeah, so you have the soldiers. They only come to get what they need, right? And if anything breaks, they don't fix it because it's very low on the list of priorities. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense to me logically. If you can then translate that into a scene where you can be like, okay, what do they come and pick up, right? I'm thinking about like potentially some tools, maybe some military hardware, and then you can translate that into like, okay, let's have a couple of boxes that have like, I don't know, some guns or something like that, right? Or the indication of a gun, and then they just left it open because they don't care, or maybe some like hand grenades or whatever, right? But like make it full on military. If that is the thing that you're trying to showcase, go more in that route because that is really interesting, right? That one sentence, you can really just use that to like build the space out of. Because then also like your question was a while back, but oh no, it wasn't. It was 10 days ago. So critique on how to make the space more messy. If you follow the if you follow what we just said, right? Like if anything breaks, they don't fix it, and it's just military people. That is all you need to brainstorm all the assets and all the things that you want to be adding to make things more messy. It's all in that one sentence. So really think about that. Right? And just think about like, okay, military, what do we do? What kind of ship is this? Maybe we have rockets, maybe we have grenades. Weapons, like I'm staying super high level, but like all of this is the clutter that you're looking for. Or could potentially be. Yeah. Hope that was helpful, no Austin. Is there any other general design wise advice that you could help me to push this space? I think honestly, yeah, again, go back to my conversation with David. I think it started like a couple of weeks ago. You can actually go to his thread and then click on like all the videos to see which ones like we talked about. Because there's a lot of information in there already. Alex Senegal is a probably my go-to. Alex Senegal. It's probably my go-to when I want to know anything about like design. Maybe not more recently, but like when I was designing my own sci-fi stuff a while back, I would be looking at like his tutorials. Let me see if I can has a bunch of good. Let me see. Oh.
All right, welcome.
There we go. Okay, so this is a really good little tutorial, little video, talking about like just like common design mistakes, right? Like if you wanna learn from designers, that's the people that you look at. I'm honestly, when it comes to design, I'm probably not the best to ask, because I will just point you to the people that actually do this for a living. Yeah, definitely have a look at this tutorial. I think it's going to be good. It's free. Yeah, it is really interesting. Like all the stuff that's brought up, it's going to be very valuable. Cool. Thanks, Austin, for sharing your work. Do we have people in the chat? Let's switch this up. Like, who is still on the list? Who has not been seen? And who wants to be seen first? Let's do that. David is saying restart the project. I mean, yeah. It might be the best thing to do. It is a hard pill to swallow. But designing is tricky. Designing is really difficult. So if you want to get it right, and you don't want it to look like a box, I think there's a high likeliness that you might have to at least scrap like a part of it. Basil, you are on the list, I think. Yeah. Here. Davis is you, I think. I'm just guessing here, according to the name, but I think that's you, right? I didn't actually. This is one of the people that, fortunately, I didn't do any preparation for. So let me have a look here. I made some changes. I tried to make the story behind the environment more specific. That's awesome. So, more blood on the floor, into the chair. Look, on the doctor's table, I added cigarettes, an ashtray, a box with noodles. Oh, sorry. Find that the doctor's a little bit chaotic and it doesn't keep his workplace tidy. Next to the doctor's table, there's a container for human organs, implying that at this point, this underground clinic is to harvest organs. Awesome, let's have a look. That all sounds really good, by the way. Fantastic work on that. Need more. That would honestly be really interesting. Bags. Best doctor ever. Okay, that's cool. Like that. See, like, that's like a lot of personality, right? Okay, yeah, this is good stuff, though. This is really good stuff. It's almost like it's gonna be hard to read. Maybe it's also like the resolution that I have on my screen right now. But it would almost be kind of cool to have like a list of people and like where they need to go, right? Like where he's sending like the organ, something like that. Be pretty interesting as well. But this stuff is really good. I like what you've done here. Really great stuff. Yeah, that's really good. Let's see, there's more blood on the floor as well, which is awesome. I mean, for the scene, not for the person, I'd say, but definitely for the scene. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. It does add a lot where it feels like it's touched more than just like a singular surface, right? And then we have like this stuff here. Oh my god, this doesn't look like an organ. This looks like freaking bolognese sauce or something like that. um Hey, look, maybe this is his lunch, you know? Like he didn't have a plate, so he's just eating out of that. Ooh. Gross. Um why a gaming mouse pad? No, it doesn't. It's not a gaming mouse pad. It doesn't have like all the RGB and like all the symbols, you know? Like hello, I'm new here thanks to YouTube. What are we looking at? So currently we're looking at people's 3D environment artwork and I'm giving them feedback for it. That's what we're looking at. Yeah, this is a really cool scene. I love what you've done with it. I think honestly this is in a really good spot now, right? Like the storytelling is a little bit more fleshed out. We get like a little bit of hints. Like people get to infer a lot of stuff what's happening, right? Which is we're getting to that spot where like people will make up like different kind of story, which is like the good spot to be in. If we're gonna be nitpicky, it is still weird that it shows a pulse, even though it's not connected, you know? It's not necessarily like an immediate thing to do, but it's one of those details, right? So let me see. So I would like to ask feedback on the changes that I've made, or about the picture on the doctor's table. I've added it to show some bits of the doctor's panel. Yeah, let's have a look at it, because I kind of skipped over it. What about the picture on the table? Should I keep it? It's AI. On like the AI front, I mean, it's more of a personal choice. I honestly don't mind it too much. I feel if you want to, it depends on how you feel about it yourself, right? So I'll let you make that decision. But if you want to avoid using any AI, your creative projects, you can look at sites like Unsplash for royalty-free like images. Like that's the site that I tend to use. But it's totally up to you. It kind of feels though that it is a little bit weird that he just has like a random picture of like him and like a couple of his friends, you know? Like it doesn't feel like it relates to anything. Like I think what could be interesting is if you have like a diploma or something like that, right? Where he framed like his diploma. Because I'm just thinking about myself, right? Like I'm in my office, quote unquote, right now, and I would not want to have a picture of myself there necessarily. Maybe that's just me. Maybe a diploma, because it then strengthens the connection between like, oh, this is a legitimate doctor, you know? But maybe it's not. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think if you're already asking the question, I think there might be something there to look into, right? Because I feel like that might be like your gut telling you like, it's not the best thing that I could do. Maybe there's something else. Or maybe their wife, maybe their kids, something like that, right? Like a couple of family pictures. Because maybe in that sense, what could happen is you could kind of infer that they might be doing it for like a family member or something like that, right? Hello, Ada. Good to see you here. Ada is saying a lot of museum websites offer open access to their image libraries. Worth looking through, like that for such images. Hey, that's a good shout, actually. A veterinary diploma. You know what? Like Rubber Ducky Girl, that's actually a pretty good idea. I kind of like that. You know, it puts more like a comedic spin. Um, yeah, it puts like more of a comedic spin on it, right? Yeah. I'm so sorry, Tim, for repeating my question, but I'm not sure if you saw it. I missed my answer. If I subscribe this week, will I show my work next week? Yeah, you can put your work for like Whip Wednesday. Like it's literally just a tag that you put on your work, and then whenever it's the next Wednesday, it picks up all the people that have tagged their work. So yeah, lovely to see you here, Ada. Good to have you around. Let's see. What else is here? In the Half-Life 2 lab, all the scientists have their pictures in the lab. Yeah, it's nice in my opinion. Okay, so maybe it is nice if you have like more of them, right? Is your Discord open to invites? If so, may I have the link? Sorry, it's a closed Discord though. So there is like a fee that's attached to it, but I promise you, you get a whole bunch of stuff in return as well. Diplomas are usually found on walls, not desks. That is true. That is true. I would add more pictures for sure. Yeah. Family pictures. The veterinary diploma, that cracked me up though. I think that's a great idea. CSDevX, subscribing is worth it. Oh, thank you so much. I mean, you do get like a really chunky PDF as your welcome gift as well. Get to enjoy that too. But the rest of the scene is looking really good though, Facia. Let's see, was there anything else? What can I do to make the scene look better? Maybe some changes to lighting or textures. I think what could be interesting is, I think it comes down to post-processing, where it's actually down to the details, right? Like having a look at like all the final things that you can do. For example, what I would potentially look into, let's make a little list, right? Let's make a little shopping list of improvements. The first thing that I would say is material response. What I mean by that is that you have a bunch of like metallic surfaces, and then you also have like a bunch of non-metallic surfaces, right? It would be nice that these are more shiny. And even the tiles might, yeah, if we make the metal more shiny and even the tiles make them more shiny as well, we then push the contrast between the two a little bit further apart, and we give them a little bit more identity. Because what is happening right now is that all of it feels relatively similar. You know? If we look at the response between what is happening between the letter and the metal, so just doing like a tweak pass to especially try to make like the metals more stand out and get some of those like nice areas where, for example, on the blood, right? Like you would expect that to be like really reflective compared to some other surfaces. So especially looking at the metal, blood, and the tiles, right? Like those are like prime candidates to have a little bit more shine and a little bit more like roughness variation. Let's see. What else can we have a look at? If we're going to be talking about like post-processing, see what we can quickly do. That. Pushing the brightness and the contrast a little bit. What do we do? Don't want to be pushing the saturation up too much though. Yeah, this is something that you would potentially have to do yourself. It's just having a look through the post-processing, going into Photoshop and really tweaking like the way that it reads. That could definitely be helpful. Thinking about potentially like brightening some of the screens as well. So, because normally those screens, or especially this screen specifically, because we're trying to get attention to, right? So if we then, I'll darken it. Yeah, look at that. That feels like more interesting as well. Maybe I did it a little bit too much, but now we're getting somewhere where it becomes like more interesting to look at, right? Compared to we do have to keep the balance of the whole scene in line though. Are you pushing it a bit too hard now? We do need to keep the balance of the scene in line a bit, because we're seeing that I'm pushing the brightness of this area a little bit too much. So yeah, gotta be careful with that. But it would be nice to just like make some of those areas stand out comparative to each other. For example, really going in and just being like, okay, this area needs to stand out a little bit more. Accentuate that. Right? Essentially small stuff like that. Putting a little bit more contrast. Oh, a bit too much though. You get my point. You're gonna do a way better job at it than I am. So a little bit of contrast in the scene. Also lighten the screens. And it could be nice to have actual lights, right? Like have, because you already have one, but I feel like it's very limited. It almost feels like you took a rectangular light and you have like a distance of like, let's say 30 or something, where I would expect it to have like a bit more of a wider reach. Even though the read that you have on the table here looks pretty nice. Yeah. Those are some things that I would say could be improved. Yeah, hope that was helpful. All right. Let's have a look at some of the other ones. We have another one actually that kind of goes into the same line as what we were talking about before, right? So I'll keep this relatively quick. But if you want some more context, Sadvik, feel free to look at the other people that we talked about before, especially in the beginning. We talked a lot about the same sort of stuff that's happening here as well. First things first though, I remember your scene, and this looks way better than any previous iteration you've done. So it looks more grounded, it looks way more interesting. If you just have a look at the shapes, like there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Cables are freaking crazy though, but watch out for that. But like this structure by itself does a really good job of pulling attention to it. So that is beautiful. Already a good start for the scene. Now, when it comes to the composition, I did like a quick thing here again, where it would be so good to have people focus more on like the coolest looking thing in the scene, right? So I did like a little bit of like an overpaint really quickly again. You compare the two, you can see that the foreground is pretty light. So what I try to do is I try to darken the foreground. I try to lighten up the thing that we actually want to see. Again, maybe I went a little bit overboard, right? Maybe it needs to be more something that is going to be some stuff in here. Maybe it needs to be more something like this, you know, like a little bit more subtle. You get my point. Like, we want to focus on like the big impressive thing that we see like in the back, because that's where we want to be, rather than just railing the front. Also, because you were asking about um about the mood as well from the scene, I was looking at some of this stuff that you have, right? Which I assume is going to be like a large ventilation shaft that is just literally built underneath it. Having red light coming from the below of it, it is a little bit of a cliche, but I think it's a cliche because it looks freaking badass. So I honestly think that we should go with that. Have like a red hue, like a red glow coming from the bottom. Have the main cylinder in the scene be like lit up. So see if we can do something here. What is it? This one? See what we can. Right, you kind of want to have that like red glow coming from the bottom, and it kind of adds, like, I'm imagining that it kind of adds like a nice fill light on the entire room, right? So that we get like this very strong glow that kind of comes from like the bottom of it. It kind of adds like a very ominous kind of feel to the entirety of the scene. And then we can like contrast the other sections, right? Like we can dull some of the other sections out. And what I'm trying to do with that is I'm trying to push more of the focus towards the center, rather it being scattered, right? Because again, some of this stuff, like, this one is actually not the best example, but some of this stuff is like really nice, that you have a strong main focal point, and then you could have like additional secondary points that kind of help you with like fill up some of the other areas, right? But try to keep them like really subtle. So for example, they could literally be like little strip lights here, and they could just cast like a little bit of a glow this area, right? But they're gonna be very subtle. Because we want, again, the visual hierarchy needs to be, number one is this guy right here, right? That's where we want to focus because it looks so cool. And it's going to be an automatic focus anyway. And then we have like all the stuff that's happening beneath here, right? Because that's going to contribute to the rest of the scene. And then we have just like little dots around like corners or like areas where we would expect it. Like a doorway is usually going to have a light. Maybe a vent on top of it's going to have like small lights. But we're literally building it up for like the hierarchy. Like, for one is the biggest thing. For two is like additional secondary point. And then we have like subtle things that happen in the rest of the scene. But we want to have like a hierarchical focus. And also think about like when you talk about mood, I'm literally struck with like one question usually. Like, what is the emotion that I kind of want to convey? And what is the best sort of like lighting scenario that kind of comes with it, right? Because let's say if we go with like an extreme example, right? If you want this to be like a very peaceful, like, I don't know, a very peaceful scene, then red is not going to be the best color choice, because red like heightens tension. It kind of forces like anger and dread, and it's not the best color to use in combination with the mood that you kind of set, right? So if you want to convey some sort of calm, like, you usually go for like something like nice and calming, like a soft blue, soft green. compared to a red. Because yeah, that is also what we talked about with David's work, where the lighting has an effect on our emotions. So yeah, but this is awesome stuff, Sadvik. Really cool stuff. Loved seeing this. I was like really pleasantly surprised by just seeing the seeing the growth. Even though it took like a long while, this is way better, like 1,000 times better than what it was before. Like honestly. So yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. And yeah, thank you for sharing your work. Appreciate it. I do like the MRI heart scan on the monitor with the abdominal. Oh, yeah, there is a lot of sci-fi this week, David. There is. And Slate is saying that he really liked the complexity of the previous one, which I do agree with. Like there was like already like a nice balance in terms of the design, right? The detail of the design. Designers asking, what do you think about using path tracing and editing tools like Photoshop and DaVinci for color grading and some final tweaks for a portfolio piece? I mean, path tracing is really demanding, right? But if you can run it, I don't think there's an issue with it. Because here's the thing, like for us environment artists, like we want to make stuff look good, right? And if that means that you go into path tracing and whatever tools that you use, maybe from like a technical perspective, they are not really great to use because yeah, there's barely anyone that can run like a full scene in path tracing, right? Unless you have like, I don't know, the LSS or whatever. Um so from a technical perspective, it might not be the best thing to use, but that only applies if you yourself want to become like a lighting artist, right? Because then it is your job to optimize it. Like our job as environment artists is not to optimize the lighting. So want to use path tracing if that looks the best for your work, use it. It is always good to kind of know the performance implication from like a high level, right? Because if you might encounter a question where in an interview you might be asked like, okay, this is rendered with path tracing, how would you do it without path tracing, without ray tracing, and only using light maps, right? That might be a question that comes up, and having an answer to that question is good to have in the back pocket in those cases. But I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to be asked something like that, to be honest. So yeah. And about editing tools like Photoshop and DaVinci for color grading and some final tweaks for the portfolio piece, that is totally fine. I mean, honestly, you can literally translate all the stuff that you do in Photoshop and you can encode that into a texture and then send it back to Unreal Engine if you wanted to. And it will look the same or like similar. So yeah, no one's gonna fault you for that, honestly. Plus also you're not gonna be doing it inside a professional environment, or it's highly unlikely, especially in bigger companies, right? I've never had to do like any post-processing. I just make cool shit and then someone else like puts like the cherry on top of it, you know? Yeah, it's all good. I would even say I would recommend it for thumbnails especially, where if you have a nice scene, I would exaggerate some of the colors and some of the contrast ever so slightly in your thumbnails to make them more effective at capturing people's attention. That's what I would do. Yeah. Good question, designer. Thank you for asking it. Let's keep it on rolling. We're gonna do a quick one here because Cameron submitted a really cool looking asset, but I honestly don't really have too much to say. Because I think this is looking sick already. So I said like there's actually not too much to add. I would get into Unreal first. And because you were asking questions, Cameron, about hey, I'm very new to Unreal, so would it be worth to try to create a basic scene in Unreal or just use one of the stock marketplace scenes for a quick Unreal Engine look dev? Um, If I remember though, yeah, so you wanted to make this the hero asset of a New York style apartment scene, right? So in that case, I would honestly already make your own little scene and get it set up in Unreal. And for something really simple, if you just want to render a single asset like this, you can literally just take a cube, bevel it, flip the normals, and then you have like a little studio. Like that is literally what I'm showcasing here. This is basically just like a large cube that is beveled, and then I flip the normals, and that is just basically my scene. And then I just slapped like a material on it that is like, yeah, whatever color you want to. And then obviously you do like a little bit of a lighting studio setup, which is usually 3 lights. Like in the PDF that you all get, if you're a part of it, part of the community, I explain like 3-point lighting in there as well. So it's basically a fill light, which is basically in this case like even aligned with the camera. You have you have a key light, which is basically aligned with your camera. You have a fill light coming from the right, and you have a rim light coming from the back. That's a quick example. And then if you want to add like, especially for your plastic, right? If you want to get those nice reflections, we need something more to be reflected back onto those materials, right? So that's why I added like the HDRI in here, which is basically an environment that is added onto a sphere that can then be used to capture reflections and that kind of stuff. That would be cool to use for this case where you want to have like shiny reflections on plastic. But yeah, if you're going to be using this as an environment piece, might as well get used to it. Might as well get used to using Unreal and getting into it. That was the goal for the project. But yeah, really good stuff. Really good stuff, Cameron. Like the look of it. Yeah, great work. Oh, and also the final thing, why I'm kind of being very loose on the feedback for this week, Cameron, is because what's gonna happen now is that you're gonna make. Ooh. Sorry, got distracted by pretty colors outside. It's beautiful though. What I was saying is you're gonna make a switch to Unreal now, right? So what is gonna happen is you're gonna have a couple of issues with the translation from Marmoset to Unreal. So that means that whatever I suggest now, you're gonna have to tweak if you're gonna render it in Unreal anyway. So I would say get it in there, try to get it as good as possible, and then see what you need to do to get like all those like fine details working. Because there's like a whole bunch of like little checkboxes and little things that you have to enable, get it looking as good as you got it looking now. Cool. Let's move on to the next person. Oh yeah, thank you for posting your Cameron. Sorry, I had to let my girlfriend know about that. We're back. Okay. Couple more people here. Let's have a look at Mikval's work next. Or If someone else is here, I don't know if Lily, if you're here. I don't think Liz is going to be here for this week, but yeah. If Lily, if you're here, let me know, and then we'll switch it over. Let's see. Where is McVal? McVal's working on the mountain monastery. How do the rocks currently work in the placement, noise, and the overall shape? The top of the back wall is still rough. Okay, reference I attached has watercolor variation. The best way to achieve this, vertex color with different textures. Okay, so we got two questions here. One is about the placement of the rocks, right? And I think honestly, if we're seeing it in contrast, in context, sorry, not in contrast, it is actually going in the right direction. What we still have though is we still have a lot of defined cubes. Not cubes, I don't want to put too much, you know, like I don't want to do that. Yeah, it's still pretty defined, right? Like if we actually look at the reference, you can kind of see that there's the same sort of variation going on. So I think we're hitting the big shapes, right? But then you have areas like this where you have a lot of detail happening, right? So I think it could still be improved. And I think again that's going to be a combination of the placement and the texture, right? Like this is a time where like you got everything in its place. You need to really play around with the surfacing. Yeah, I don't really mind the boxy shape. I mean, it kind of depends on what kind of rocks you want to create, right? Because you can definitely see that if we look at these rocks, right, you kind of have directionality going that way. Right, so that is like the dominant direction of this cliff, kind of just going that way. And you could achieve the same thing by just like angling all the rocks and building the cliff that way, right? So that could also be an option to try. I mean, yeah. Well, whatever you think you need to do, right? Like, I think that could also be an option. Make them less boxy, get more variation. Because what is going to happen if you make them less boxy, it gives you more flexibility with the silhouettes, right? Because right now, you do have like all these like boxy kind of shapes, right? So if you add like more of a silhouette change, then that will break up like the boxy as well. But I don't want you to get rid of like all of it because those shapes, they're like pretty handy. They're pretty handy to create stratification, right? So the combination of the two is actually what makes it interesting, right? So again, what we can see here, that you have these like cool repeating shapes going on, and then there's like a big break, right? And that's where the combination becomes like really interesting and makes it feel like really organic. It's the contrast between those two shapes. How did it look on the right side? I mean, they are different surfaces, right? So they are different surfaces by design. Because even in the reference, right? Like this is more of like a big kind of rock that you can kind of see is like this sort of shape. Feels almost man-made. Though it might not be, but it might just be like the shape of the rock. But it feels like, yeah, it's softer than the rest of it, right? But again, what I like is that you get this like surface. That's the thing that I was talking about before, right? Where you see a transition from rock into wall. Like it's very nice. Like it's very clean, the way that it transitions from one to the next. And then you have like, if we really were to break down the lines, it kind of goes from very thick surface to like how it blends together. That becomes really interesting, where you have this transition of going from like thick section and then it goes from like small, because the more that we can do that on like any type of surface, right? You have your section here, but it still really feels like it's pretty uniform. And the more that we can create that variation, even like go out of it, but the more that we create sort of that variation, the more natural. We wanna have like some like organic kind of feel. So different widths here can help with the natural kind of feel. And that can be applied to like a lot of areas, right? Where, for example, this area as well, like if you have like a little path that kind of goes in and out. Say this is like a boulder that fill and carve their way around. And sort of the stuff that we talked about last week, right? Where this sort of stuff, sort of variation, like really adds to the whole sense that it's like a really natural environment. And it makes the surfaces feel less boring as well. Again, same here. Right? Like, haven't done much on that path, to be fair. No, that's fine. I think it's more about like general shape language, right? Like general shape language where it's more like a fundamental thing to kind of have a look at some of these paths and make them more interesting. Because I love this. Like I only have like one image and I'm like, oh my god, it looks so cool. Because it seems like it goes here and then it kind of goes around this way and then goes here. And then you can probably go in here and then like the rest of the build. But just like little switchback that it does, that adds so much visual interest, right? Because now you can kind of see that people go up here, but then they go up. And this is like, ooh, this is like nice to look at. Yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. Like try to make it feel like really organic. Yeah, I kind of want to see the cliff. I know that you added like a picture, right? Tracks with decals, that is good. I think that's a good idea. In here. The same? Yeah, you kind of have that same build-up as well, right? Okay. Yeah. We're getting some cool stuff happening here. It's gonna be interesting how to blend those two. Because it's gonna take a little bit of work, right? But that is starting to look really good though. Because you have, what I like about this is that you have your bigger surfaces and then you're trying already to like vary them up. Having like a couple of denser sections. Right, so there is variation going on. I think it would still be nice to like Slate to say more cracks or more like dense sections where you can just be like, okay. Let's see, maybe this area, right? Like have a lot of stuff happening here. And then have like big cleaner surfaces again. Yeah. Yeah, that's the issue with RVT, right? As soon as it goes vertical, we're getting a lot of stretching on RVT. So, I mean, there must be a way to get around it, but yeah, it's not that great for those areas necessarily. Maybe just use triplane or blend on the vertical. Yeah, I would think that could work as well. Also, I know that this is like temporary placement, right? But be careful with placement of these guys. Pick like a couple of placements where you have like a cluster, right? Like a cluster of like a bush and like a tree, and then leave the rest just like empty. Because otherwise we're again adding like a bunch of noise. I don't think you can, Connor. Because I mean, no, that's where tech artist needs to come in, right? Yeah, it is a capture top down from the landscape, but I wonder if you can translate the location data, right? Because you know where you are, and then if you can kind of sample like, oh, this is the tidable, then try planar project that tidable, right? To do something like that, really. But anything. This way goes into that technical territory, right? I know that I tried to do it. I tried to experiment with it, and then I got tired, and then I stopped doing it. Because also it's not worth it for like, because we're really talking about like almost vertical surfaces, right? That's where it kind of breaks down, and it is just so much easier to just slap like a decal on it. Or hey, McVal, if you want to try out some stuff, that's where Houdini could come in place, right? Where you say like, hey, I got this landscape, I got these rocks, blend them together, extract all the data, and like create some sort of like automatic like skirt mesh or something like that, right? That blends the two. That is something that the Far Cry engine had, where like if at a cliff it would just like generate cliffs automatic. Pretty cool. There's an edge skirt node in Houdini. No, that's cool. Might as well give it a try then. I don't know how that works though. I've never touched Houdini. And the second question was, there's a lot of color variation across the cliffs. What would be the best way to achieve something similar? So let's have a look. Because you're gonna have to do a combination of a bunch of things, right? Because you kind of want to have a base color variation already. Okay. Again. Hide it underneath this one because I only want this cliff really. That's what I care about. Yeah, I don't know what the black stuff is. I don't really care too much of the black stuff. I'm probably gonna ignore the black stuff. But you kind of want to have something like this, like some sort of like base variation already built in. And then what you do is basically do like you said, right? Like have like a triplanar like stratification mask, which is like really big, like a stratification texture. And then you just like layered like the layers of the rock like on top of it. So you kind of want to, I mean, an easy example. I think the Grand Canyon is an example, right? Where you can identify like all the sedimentary layers of the rock. Real quick. Ah, why is image search so difficult these days? Come on, AI, leave my references alone. Please. Let's see. Let's see. This is a good one. Get this one in. Oh, yeah. Really good. 3 pixels tall. Jesus. Is this higher res? Oh, slightly. Okay. Yeah, this is a good example of what I mean, right? Like you almost want to have like a macro variation mask where you basically capture data that is going to be like really similar to this. And then layer that on top of it, and that is going to be world-based. And that is going to help with blending things together as well, because now we have a consistent mask that goes on top of like all of our rock surfaces, and it's going to help with just like creating which could be really, really cool to work with. The thing that you probably want to think about is that you don't necessarily want to have straight lines, right? Because that is somewhat of a unique pattern to sandstone, question mark? I don't even know like which kind of rock this is. Because you can't really identify like recognizable sections in here, but you could potentially just have some sort of mask, but then kind of blend it with like a cloud mask or something like that to get a little bit more variation, and then just angle it on top of all the rocks where it kind of just follows, like again, where it kind of follows like the general direction of the rock. That could be really sick if you get like all those things to align in the same sort of way so that it creates consistency. All of it would be cool. Yeah, you want to have like your rock variation plus your world-based variation. Oh, also, just a reminder for people that are new here. If I say anything that you don't get, if I'm speaking with like complex words, please let me know in the chat. That is what these sessions are all about. So feel free to ask any question. And then if you want to then add like the black stuff, more unique stuff on top of it, you can just do that with a decal, right? I think that stuff is like relatively easy to do. Yeah. So let's do a little bit of recap here, right? So you did a really good job, and I think you're making really good progress. There's still some stuff to do with the rocks themselves, right? Like you said, less boxy rocks. Also, I'm still looking for a high density detail. So maybe having like one rock that just has like more high frequency detail, that could be good. And then for the blending, it would actually be your macro mask. Gonna help a lot as well. Yeah. Good stuff, MacFal. Thank you so much for the update. And yeah, cool to see this trotting along. You know, you're doing great stuff. Let's see, we're jumping over to Lily. Lily, first of all, congratulations on finishing your latest project. So congratulations on publishing that. It's brilliant. Does the PDF file when joining membership gets updated early? Or yearly, I think, right? No, it doesn't get updated anymore. Where I'm currently focusing on like a bunch of other stuff, so we don't really do like any updates. Who knows? There might be a time where I have a plan at a certain point potentially to like add more updates to it, but that is not on the table. But thank you so much for asking that question. Cool. So Lily, let's have a look. Lily's working on the cavern. Sorry, I got rocks on my mind from like MechFal, I think. So Lily is saying, I've been working on the blockout for an environment, but I struggle with getting the camera to proportion the scaling of the objects not entirely right. Cool. A thing to help with that is mannequins. Add mannequins to your scene and just scatter them everywhere. That is super helpful if you want to get any sort of scale right, because it immediately allows you to see proportions comparative to person height, right? So if you're running this in Unreal Engine, if you type in mannequin, like the engine, the engine itself has one, drag into your scene. Really, really helpful. But let's have a look. So I kind of did like a quick comparison, right? So this is the way that I would look at things. And helpfully, we actually have a character here. And what I did is I just took like the upper, like the torso region, basically the torso and the head. And then I saw that like, okay, if I take that guy and stack him 3 times, that is sort of like the height of this little area over here, right? Which kind of gives me some sort of like proportional guidelines to work. So if we then translate that to here, if I then do like a really rough sketch and say like, okay, guy is this tall, for example, we're gonna roughly end there. So you can kind of see what that does to the proportions, right? We kind of so we do have this area here. Kind of do the same thing. Yeah, that is usually the way that we do things, right? Like we just take like the most recognizable thing, usually like a person, and then see how many times that fits into like the proportions that were unsure. So I kind of did that here. I think I might have scaled him like a little bit too tall for what he is. So I think he's actually going to be like a little bit smaller, which kind of ends up that did exaggerate some of the. But still like the same exercise, right? That's times 3. Good. And that gives us like a rough ballpark to work with. Because honestly, that little section here was like the first thing that really stood out, because you can see that if we look at the rough proportions, little box, compare that to like the height of the table. Right? Even if we were to compare a box, we can see that this box has different proportions compared to the box that we drew here, right? Like yours feels like way more square compared to the box that we see here that feels way more rectangular. So that's the first thing that really stood out to me. So that means that, yeah, to compensate, I knew that we either had to like scale this up and to get sort of the same proportions, or scale the width down, right? Like we can achieve the same proportions by like shaving a bit of the width. But in this case, it would make more sense to actually add to the height instead of taking away from the width. Because I did feel that the overall house could be more imposing and more interesting. Or bigger in the rest of the scene. Yeah. And then honestly, from that point, like I would use the same sort of mechanic, like the same sort of thought process to do the rest of the scene, right? Because now we can start inferring like, okay, if this is that tall, we kind of know that this is in a good position. We can then see, okay, this is the first floor. This is the first floor. So we can kind of, if we know that the proportions feel right about one element, we can then start extracting the rest of the element from that one. So we know that this floor needs to go up here roughly. That means this has this floor as well. So it's gonna come up. And that has like knock-on effects on the entire scene. Next is a little bit of a modularity breakdown, because that was a question from Lily as well. So Lily wants to improve modularity in trim sheets. How should I tackle this? I have a vague idea for the wall, the floor, and the fence, but not for the other elements in my environment. Um, yeah, so usually what I look at when it comes to trim sheets, I am looking at the sort of materials. And what I mean with materials is like the type of material, right? So we have what I can see is very dominant is wood. You know, like this varnish type of wood. Number two is some sort of plaster for the walls. Self-explanatory. And then got some fabric. Four is like some ish. See, like all the wood, like the tables, the chairs, they kind of mostly consist of wood. And we got like the, say, metal trim. Anything metal, we can kind of make use of. Just, I don't know, one tileable or maybe multiple tiles. We'll see. But I think the most important thing is that we can just like distill the materials and then see if what is the best type of texture that we can use. So for example, for the plaster, right? Or like, let's say for the brick work, I think it's actually brick plaster. Super simple, right? We don't need a trim sheet. We don't need it to wrap around like corners, that kind of stuff. It's always fenced off by like these wooden struts. So that is going to be slideable. So slideable, super easy. The fabric, I would honestly, I'm lazy, so I would do that with like a tileable and then just add like a trim, literally cut into the geometry and add like a gold trim on there, and then just like simulate the whole sheet. But that's a tileable. That also means that this metal is going to be a trim sheet as well, because we do see that used a lot. So anything that is going to have like those like little edges, those little trims, those little here, like all that kind of stuff, like all these ornamental details, that could all be trim sheets. So that means that if I want to gold on a metal sheet, that is going to be a trim. And then because we have so much variation in terms of the wood and how it's going to be used, I think that's going to be a combination of a tileable and a trim. The reason why that's going to be a tileable is because sometimes we have big surfaces, right? So like the floor, that is definitely going to be a tileable. We have the tops of these tables, which might also be a tileable. Maybe a different one, maybe like a varnished wood tileable. And then anything else that is kind of made out of wood that is not a big repeatable surface is going to be a trim. Right, so that's why for the wood, we're doing a combination of a tileable and a trim sheet. And I think then we have like the majority of our stuff planned out already. And then anything that's left over is basically going to be unique, I think. If we, well, I'll say unique. If we cannot cobble it together from like our trim sheets and tileables that we already have, then we do it unique, right? So for example, this glass, probably going to be a unique glass, right? That makes sense. These frames, like the interior of these frames, that's going to be unique. We're not going to doubles for that. A lot of sense. But when it comes to like this sort of stuff, right? This looks unique. We can actually cobble it together with like a bunch of stuff that we already have, right? Like we have gold, so that's easy. Those little variations of metal, like the green metal or glass or whatever, we could decide that on the spot, but we could also build that into our trim sheet for metal, right? So we could have like little sections, kind of. But anything else, like all the patterning, like all the surfaces here, that can all be made with like a trim sheet, wanted to, like this entire sign. with the trim sheet that we just came up with, like the combination of the wood and the metal, like those working together could build that whole sign. I think there might be a potential to looking at like the stained glass if there's a lot of it. I don't think so. But let's add it. Go first. Yeah, that's about it. And then honestly, yeah, all of this stuff, right? Like, okay, I need like a pattern like this. I'm just gonna add that in like the metal trim sheet. And then the metal trim sheet is literally just gonna be like, so this is number 4. So number 4 is our metal trim sheet. What I would do then is if we have our trim sheet, I would then start mapping out like what I need. So we'd have like gold, we have like that sort of pattern, right? Because that's also like relatively frequent on like, multiple areas. We can reuse that. And then just see what else you need, right? And kind of just add it to the trim sheet as you go. But and a last tip that I'll give for the trim sheets is keep it super simple. Is you wanna keep it simple and then iterate. What I mean with that is that build a trim sheet. I want you to literally bake down like the most simple representation. Like even draw on it, right? Like take it into Photoshop and just have like your layout of it and just start drawing on top of it. And then get that into Blender or whatever you use and start using it to make like assets and see if you can make it work. Because what is going to happen with a trim sheet always happens is that you're going to miss things. You're going to have things that are going to be that need to be bigger. So you will be changing a trim sheet, especially if you are new to trim sheet, right? You're going to have to iterate on it as you build it. So get the most simple representation, like literally like a Photoshop painting, right? Like just do it quick, like 10 minutes, get it in there and start using it. And then see if you can build all the things that you want to build in the scene that way. Yeah. Best of luck, Lily. Best of luck with all that. And thanks for posting here. And then last but not least, we have Liz. Liz is making a hot. There's I distilled your questions into 2 questions because I do try to limit these sessions. Oh. First question is like, how do I improve the lighting? The lighting feels very basic at this point, so we're kind of going for like a night lighting. Okay? Right, I think what we have now is we have a skylight. That's what it feels like. We don't really have a directional light by the feel of it. So what I want you to add first is add a directional light and just make it blue. Because I do want to make it like if we're going for like a night setup, right? If that is the goal, then we do need to have some sort of like representation of the moon, right? Give some sort of like more depth to our scene. What could potentially be cool is if you stick with the sort of thinking that this is going to be a diorama, right? If you literally cut it out the same way as this, what could be cool is if you have like fake trees, and this could literally be planes with like leaf alphas on, right? Plane where you create like fake shadows, where you can see that like a shadow is being cast on this wall, but it's from like a fake tree that is standing here. Right? So this is literally gonna have like a plane with a texture on it, and the light is gonna pass through it, and that is gonna be projecting onto the building. And you could really fake some really interesting effects. Obviously, you want to do it in places where it kind of makes sense, right? That you can create like, because what I want to do is I want to create like some really interesting contrast, right? Between like the lighter parts of the moon, right? Where the sun, while the moon just like hitting the building, and then some like duller parts where it's hidden in shadow. So some of those fake leaf cards could really work. Especially if you're working with night lighting. Have some like interior lights. Right? Like warm lighting coming from the inside. Especially from like cracks in the door or something like that, right? Like where you can kind of see like little glimpses of the light coming out of like certain areas. It could be really cool. And it can literally be like really subtle, right? Like it could be like a hole, like a crack in the window that's like letting out some light. So that's what I would do first. So get the moon in. Basically just gonna turn like Unreal Engine Sun into a moon. And then add interests with like leaf cards or something. Metal Gear MK3 is saying golden hour lighting might look great on this. Yeah, it could. It definitely could. Like golden hour is usually like a good shout to go with, right? But Liz wants to make this like a night scene. Let's have a look at what we can do with that, right? Maybe you could do something where you have like a stereotypical like heart. There's like light coming out of here. You can really play around with some of it. Cool. The second question is about composition and block out thoughts. So just like the composition currently. I think overall it's pretty good. I would still try to make it somewhat like this. It has a lot of charm because otherwise it kind of feels like it's not gonna look as good as you try to make it like a big, because then we're gonna need a lot of filling up. Like we're gonna have to fill up like a bunch of the background with trees, all that kind of stuff, and it's gonna be really hard to make it look good. So I honestly would try to replicate this cutout. Because that could be sick. But yeah, on the composition, like there's not too much here yet, right? I mean, it is block out. There's supposed to be a lot of stuff here yet. And it's pretty straightforward when it comes to the composition. What you could potentially look into is having the building like slightly more angled, because yours does feel a little bit more flat. And I think that is also to do with the perspective and the field of view of the camera. A way that you can tell is that your lines, like your leading lines, your perspective lines, are way flatter than perspective lines that we have here. You can really see that like they're going towards the vanishing point, right? With yours, it's going to take like way longer, and that is going to exacerbate the distortion. It's going to have an effect on that too. So yeah, that would be something to look into. Get that cutout feel. I think it's so cool, so unique. Do something really interesting with that. And then when it comes to the actual blockout itself, about like the window frames. Window frame is too thin. I also don't want this to become stylized. I am not worried about the window frame. I also don't know which specific one you're talking about. Like, are you talking about like this little? Because also like it's gonna look somewhat different once we have a texture on there too. Because this is just a block out. So with textures, it's different too. It's gonna change the perspective, the perception of it. What I do like though is that you can kind of see that the proportions of these windows, they're way more rectangular than the ones that you have. I think that gives them like a lot of character. So it might be worth to just like squeeze them down. Because if you somewhat think about it, right, like if we're living in like a swampy area, the windows are probably going to be smaller because you don't want to attract like so much attention from like all the bugs and all the things flying in your house. Okay? But that could be a reason why. Yeah, cool stuff. Do some really cool stuff with these things where you have some sort of mechanism that is like linked here. Like a pulley system, right? Where like you can go in, you can like rotate this thing, it lets the boat down, and then you're good to go. You could infuse some sort of like cool things in the design like that. Sick. Yeah. Cool stuff, Liz. Let me see if I missed anything. Yeah, I think that was about it. So thank you so much for posting this. Appreciate you posting it. And yeah, I'm gonna be switching back. Oh, yeah. How was that, people? Did you enjoy that? I feel like this time there was indeed like a lot of sci-fi stuff happening, which feels interesting because I don't feel like we had such a sci-fi heavy session for such a long time. I can't remember. Like I can remember like blips of people doing like sci-fi, but this one felt really sci-fi heavy. Wonder why? People just getting into like sci-fi games, you know? Who knows? Could be a whole bunch of reasons. Let me save these all out as well so that we're prepared for a little bit, and then I'll post them in chat too. Yeah. Thanks so much for all being here. We're not gonna make this any longer because I'm also freaking warm for some reason. Human heat into my face constantly. Oh, thank you so much, Slate. I really appreciate you being here as well, and that goes for like everyone here. You know, I know that these sessions they get quite lengthy. There's a lot of repetition going on. There's a lot of like in-depth, like nerdy talk about this stuff. So I really appreciate like everyone being here. And you know, like if you have like other nerdy friends that are into this kind of shit, like feel free to share it with them too. Maybe it helps them out too. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. If you want to participate yourself, feel free to join the community below. And yeah, get your work featured for next week. Thanks for your knowledge, Tim. Oh, thanks for being here, Mateo. It's my pleasure. And then thanks for saying the same thing, Marcos. Like, it's great to have you both here. Yeah, and I'll see everyone next week when I'm back for another session. I don't think we have like a meantime when it comes to the live stream. There's also we just had like 2 beautiful workshops as well, which are currently I still need to send them off to be edited, but yeah, you can watch out for them soon. Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here. I wish you all a great evening, and I'll see you